In America, everyone counts, and the 2020 census is how that great promise is kept. Respond today online, by phone, or by mail, and help inform hundreds of billions in funding for education, health programs, and more. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov. So the issue of free speech is a critically important one. My next guest has a book that speaks about that. Ellis Cose joins us right now. Folks, if you pull his book cover up, that'll be great. Do you have it? Go ahead and pull it up, please. Come on, let's pull a graphic up, please, of his book. His book, please. Come on. Thank you very much. The Short Life and Curious Death of Free Speech in America by Ellis Cose. Ellis, always glad to have you here. We're just talking about the Breonna Taylor case. It's very interesting what has been happening around this country. You had Tennessee, where all these people all of a sudden are passing laws restricting folks from protesting. It's the First Amendment. And in fact, in Tennessee, they even passed a law that would actually cause you to lose your right to vote because you dare protest.
We're in strange times, Roland. You know, as you obviously know, we're in a time when the Republican Party has claimed that they are the champions of the First Amendment. You had 5 or 6 different speakers devote most of their talks of the Republican convention to how they are strong on free speech. At the same time, when they have this recent history of the president shutting down a demonstration in Lafayette Park in order for him to march, violently shutting down a demonstration, in order for him to march around with a Bible and stand in front of a church for a photo op. You have cities, you have states all over this place, where Republican politicians, are trying to depress the black vote and the minority vote. What is the large problem you have currently in this country, it seems to me, is that you have a minority party, I mean the Republican Party, that is insistent on trying to stay in charge against the will of a majority. And a lot of the things that they adapt are become outright violations of free speech. And certainly if you count the right to vote as part of free speech, and most scholars these days do, then all these efforts, the efforts in Florida to stop people who were convicted of crimes, even though a proposition allows them to vote now because they have to pay their fines first, and the efforts you're talking about in Tennessee are all part and parcel of this.
But the thing when you talk about what happened in Florida, first of all, Amendment 4 passes. Took 10 years to get that amendment passed. And then all of a sudden, the Republican legislature says, oh, hell no. And I kept warning people. I told Sheena Mead and Desmond Mead, I said, look, don't get too excited. I said, trust me, I don't trust the Republicans in Florida. They are going to do something because they do not want to see all of a sudden 1.4 million people get the right to vote. What soon happens? They have the power there. The Democrats have no authority because, frankly, Republicans control the legislature, passed a law. Republicans control the Supreme Court. They affirm that particular law. And then you go to the federal court. You go to the 11th Circuit. Guess what? Donald Trump has appointed more than 200 federal judges. They affirm that decision. And so now it's right. Now you got to pay all fines and fees. And the total is upwards of $700 million collectively that is going to be owed, which is why you have efforts like LeBron James and others to help people pay off these fines. But this is what we're dealing with. What we're dealing with, Ellis, we're dealing with individuals, and I'll be real clear, you're dealing with a Republican Party, a largely white party, who is looking at the demographic shifts, and they're saying, how can we hold on to power as long as possible? And we're going to use the control of the legislatures to do so.
Oh, precisely. And in Florida, Florida is not a bellwether state, but it's a state that can go either way. And when you're talking about over 1 million votes that are in play, and most of those votes would be Democratic, that's enough to flip that state. And so you're seeing these measures, as I said, all over the place. But you're seeing a doubling down on speech repression disguised as a articulation of free speech, and then you're also seeing just the bastardization of the whole notion of free speech, or at least the whole argument for free speech which goes back to the 1920s, and a lot of decisions that were written by Louis Brandeis, who basically argued that the reason that you need free speech in a democracy is that speech is the way you get to truth, and that in order to get to truth, you need as much speech as possible, because ultimately good speech will drown out bad speech, and untrue speech will drown out true speech rather would drown out untrue speech. What we have in this age of disinformation and blatant government manipulation of information and lying about information is a testing of that hypothesis, and it seems to be not true, because the government is capable and wealthy interests are capable of passing off their truth, which is not truth at all, as truth, which fundamentally undermines the whole purpose of the First Amendment and fundamentally undermines our democracy.
We and the march that we're going on, and the reason I brought those judges up, because just this week, 8 judges, Mitch McConnell is confirming. And these are judges. So again, what happens? And this is what I keep trying to explain to people about understanding why the federal courts play a role in this. So sure. We can argue, yell, and scream, which we should, the importance of electing people, electing African Americans as district attorneys, as state reps, state senators, to statewide races. Then you have this ballot initiative that black folks led, gets passed. Now all of a sudden, okay, then the Republican legislature passes a law. It now they sue, it goes to the federal court. And so when people say, I'm just going to ignore the top of the ticket, I'm going to vote what's below that. No, understand that top of the ticket, that this thing is like a domino effect. So you can get a law passed, bust your butt, took a decade, and still those federal judges can either invalidate it, affirm it, or rule it unconstitutional or constitutional. And that's why we have to, Ellis, as far as I'm concerned, be in a constant state of civic lessons, teaching people to connect the dots.
And as you imply, I mean, those federal judges are appointed for life. And so the whole idea, and the Federalist Society was very smart. I mean, they basically decided they were going to make a mission of picking the most conservative, of selecting the most conservative judges they could, and getting them installed by a Republican president on the bench. And some of these judges are in their 30s, and 40s. They're going to be around for 30, 40, maybe 50 years, long after the so-called non-whites become a majority in this country. They will be determining what our fate is. And we're coming late to the table as a group of people who are not Republicans and recognizing how important this is.
So what do you see in terms of where we're going to be in the next 10 years? What should people be looking for when it comes to this attack on free speech?
Oh, I think there are a range of things. I think we have to figure out as a society what we are going to do about speech in the internet age. A lot of hate speech, a lot of this misinformation is spread through the internet. And I'm not suggesting that we ought to censor the internet, but what I am suggesting is we need to have a better way of monitoring the internet. I mean, the position, for instance, that Facebook has taken consistently with lying and political ads is crazy. I mean, basically what they are saying is that it's perfectly okay to use their distribution medium for propaganda that they know is propaganda, that is easily recognizable propaganda, and that is injurious to our country. I mean, we clearly need to get a handle on that.
Well, heck, there's a new report out that dropped last night that shows that one of their whistleblower said how other nations are purposely spreading disinformation on Facebook that is impacting elections. And Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, they know it and refuse to do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's totally unacceptable. I mean, the other thing that we've seen, and you've already addressed this, ramp up considerably are these efforts to repress votes, whether they're through reimposing fines of one sort or another, whether they're through putting, reinstating in a sense the old poll tax of the post Civil War era. Ways that in any way possible, just to cull the polls, the rolls, and to stop minority people from voting. There are a lot of efforts that have come up lately to oppose these, and we need even more because this is a life and death issue at this point.
We, folks, again, we're talking with Ellis Cose. He is the author of this book. Go ahead and pull it up again. And it's really important, folks, where we are in terms of our society, in terms of free speech, and we should not take it for granted. Guys, come on, pull the graphic up. Thank you. The short life and curious death of free speech in America. The thing that we have to understand also is when you look at Donald Trump's constant attacks on the media, fake news, fake news, fake news. It is all by design.
Well, it's by design, and it's been reasonably effective.
Yes.
In a few ways. I mean, if you look at a recent poll, for instance, although 91% of Americans support freedom of the press, 40% also believe that the president ought to have the power to shut down those medias that misbehave, and they specifically included among that CNN and the New York Times. So he has actually garnered a constituency behind him that believes he should have the power to violate the First Amendment. He should have the power on his authority to shut down newspapers, to shut down broadcast entities. Happily, we're not at the point yet where he can exercise that non-power. But the very fact that 40% of Americans have been taken in by his rhetoric and this talk about the enemy, the press being the enemy of the people, and are willing to see him act on that, to me, that's a frightening statistic.
I want to pull in my panel here, get a chance to ask you a question. I'll start with Teresa Lundy. Teresa.
Yeah, I kind of want to know, as much as I'm really fascinated with the points that you're making, but I'm kind of wondering where did the idea of putting this into a book, because I'm sure there's probably been some stuff early on that, we could have addressed, but why put it in a book?
You're basically asking why I decided to write this book. And there are a few reasons. My most recent position was as the writer in residence for the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. And ultimately, I stepped down from that because I had decided to write a history of the ACLU, which was just published a couple of months ago, called Democracy If We Can Keep It. And I had, in thinking through, and one of the things that I also did at the ACLU, though, was to think through as a sort of project for them, the education of Americans, and particularly of college students on this issue of speech, which is one of their big issues. And the thinking that I did with that, and I should say one of the places that I went after leaving the ACLU was to become a fellow at the Free Speech Center at the University of California. So I've been thinking a lot, because for those several reasons, about where we are in speech, the history of speech, what it means, why it's important, why we have it, and what its state is now. And I decided that it was worth doing a book on. So that's the short answer to why I decided to do this book.
Next question, Malik.
Yeah, so actually, one of the things that we know that just over the years, probably since 2016, there's been a big effort out there in reference to free speech and blocking people's access to free speech, whether that was blocking Trump rallies or even going after people at restaurants, going after people who were announced to attend commencement speeches and things like that. So as
Sure.
your overall picture of free speech, is it just isolated to how it affects the left? Or do you include anything as far as just the efforts we know that are real efforts to block conservatives from free speech as well? Is it just limited to the left?
No. There's a whole chapter on that. But I think you kind of misconstrue what the argument is going on about free speech on campus, which is largely a manufactured argument and largely manufactured by conservatives because they want to take possession of the free speech debate. And if you talk about Milo Yiannopoulos, who essentially took over UC Berkeley for a huge event that he did, which became violent, which was shut down because it was violent, which cost the university millions of dollars in security to secure in the first place. And then he uses this as a weapon to say his free speech has been violated, and on the basis of that alone, the president issues an executive order telling universities they have to respect free speech. I'm not for shutting anybody down. I'm not for a cancel culture. But when you have people like Milo Yiannopoulos and like Ann Coulter, whose whole reason for existing is to say stupid, provocative things, and then to get people upset about them, and then to say, "Oh my God, I'm being shut down." The last person in the world being shut down is Ann Coulter. You hear her everywhere. She's not being shut down. Her free speech is not being denied. Milo Yiannopoulos' free speech was certainly not being denied by the universities. But I think that what happens is conservatives want to take the issue and present it that way. So so you have, like I said before, you have Trump, who shuts down a rally, marches through a park with a Bible, and then protests about free speech. Give me a break. Yes, there is an issue of free speech on campus, and you had the University of Chicago, which came out specifically against that and made a big statement, which many universities have now joined, saying that they don't back this idea of canceling people. They are not going to permit this on their campus. They are going to punish students who do it. You don't see anybody on the right saying we're going to punish people who shut down people from the left. So yes, I agree with you. It's an issue that should apply to both sides, but it should also be analyzed from both sides and fairly.
See, the thing I find, here's the thing that people have to understand before I go to Kelly, Ellis, is that on this very issue, to your point, conservatives played the victim game. Look, when I was at CNN, there are people who make money. I'm talking about make money off of the liberal media. I said CNN could go hire 1,000 conservatives tomorrow, and the next day they're going to yell, "The media is still liberal." This is a part of the game. Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager did some documentary talking about how free speech is eroding. And it was like, look what YouTube is doing. PragerU hit 1 billion views on YouTube. But part of the complaining is, they're taking our speech. That's why Zuckerberg right now, let's just be real clear, he is scared of Donald Trump criticizing him in tweets, and that's why this whole dancing. Oh, what can I do to make conservatives feel good? To see those two that minstrel show, Diamond and Silk, before Congress, they was complaining, how they were censored on Facebook for the craziness. No. You have people who want to say crazy stuff, and then if you say you can't do it, you're censoring me. My speech is now being quelled.
Well, precisely. I think the other thing that's important to understand, there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what the constitutional guarantee of free speech is. It is not a guarantee that anybody must be granted an audience wherever they want to speak. What it does specifically is it bars Congress, and by implication, the federal government, from imposing limits on speech. Just a little historical note. Until the 20th century, free speech didn't even apply to state governments. That came about as a result of court decisions, and specifically a decision in 1925 called Gitlow v. New York, where they decided that the First Amendment applied to the states. Before that, it didn't, which is why states were able to abolish the distribution of abolitionist literature. And so, the reason why I wrote this book, is partly to just give that history, because people need to understand what this country means when it says free speech, what is specifically protected by our Constitution and what is not.
Kelly Bethea, question for Ellis Cose.
So given the current political climate, specifically when it comes to free speech and the assault against it, more or less, how exactly do you fight it? Because when I was in law school, we talked about, I took First Amendment law, and we talked about, the free marketplace of ideas, and how you typically, or at least the theory is that the truth will come to light by way of more or less a flooding of the truth coming in, drowning out the lies. And right now, specifically in 2020, and really during this Trump administration, it's almost like the opposite is happening. So how do you combat that when that theory of flooding the marketplace with the truth isn't working in favor of the truth?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I'll say out front, I don't have a total answer to that. I really don't. I don't think we've come up with one yet. But I think part of the answer is that you insist on challenging these lies, this misinformation, and calling it what it is. I think we have conventions in the press, in the press, and I've been a member of the press my entire adult life. We have conventions in the press that lead us to respect people who are lying to us because we believe in giving both sides. And I think what has become clear is that that's not adequate anymore when you have an entire administration practically that lies all the time, and it depends on you not to challenge them. And so I think the role, this became an issue during McCarthyism, when an editor suggested we fact check everything McCarthy says. That never really happened. But I think that increasingly needs to happen when in this age, when propaganda, misinformation has become just a part of politics. Also, despite the bleak landscape in the judicial branch, there are going to be more appointments made to federal judges and whatnot, which is why it's important to have someone other than these conservative Republicans making these appointments. And there will be a revisiting of some important decisions, including Citizens United, which was the decision that eviscerated the Feingold Act, and which basically gives rich corporations and other institutions the ability to flood money into political races and to influence the result.
Folks, fascinating discussion. You definitely want to get this book. This is the latest book by Ellis Cose. It is called The Short Life and Curious Death of Free Speech in America. You want to get that. Ellis, I often use your book, The Rage of a Privileged Class, in many of my speeches. And so it's always good to chat with you.
I'm honored, sir. You take good care.
Ellis, thanks a bunch. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. Seek.com is a black-owned company founded by Mary Spio. They have these amazing products. They have their virtual reality headset right here. Allows for you to take your cell phone, pop it right into here. You can watch their virtual reality content on their site, Seek.com. You can also, of course, watch other 360-degree video, and it puts you right there in the same space. So that's this particular headset. They also have their 360-degree 4D headphones, folks, which are great for you to be able to do gaming. You can also, of course, use it for music, for videos as well. It's a really solid solid deal here. I love these headphones. Again, when I'm able to, when I'm walking and working out and doing things along those lines. And so you want to check this out. Again, these headphones right here, which are pretty cool. Go to Seek.com, CEEK.com. Use the promo code RMVIP2020, RMVIP2020. And then you'll get a discount on one or both of these products. And so we certainly appreciate Seek.com being a partner with Roland Martin Unfiltered.